add to it. It was classic Spanish.
Spanish architecture.
It was not.
You remember the address?
No.
Is it on Gasparilla close to McGregor?
It's the second house from McGregor.
Okay.
No, they built one on the corner, so it'd be the third house now. There's a big house, big building built right, careful, in front of it.
There we go.
Uh,
What's this spinning wheel about? Tell me a little bit about the history of this.
well, this was my great-grandmother's spinning wheel.
Okay.
My mother's grandmother. It was hers.
Wow, that's beautiful.
She's.
I know Barb wanted this.
Made in Virginia, and it's all 7 different woods.
Really?
Each wood is for a special purpose. This wood, you see how old this is, and yet how beautifully it's curved. It hasn't warped. It's all just done. This is one kind of wood. This is oak because it's strong. This is a different kind of wood here. And this is a different wood. All this is, this is different.
It's beautiful.
Bill made this right here. This was missing, but he went to a museum, and the man drew him a picture and told him exactly what it should be like.
And Bill made that. That's incredible. Incredible.
Yeah, but this was my grandmother. She was Louisa Jane Marshall, and she was a cousin descended from the grandfather of Chief Justice John Marshall.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and she was a cousin, like about a 4th cousin, because John Marshall was the second Chief Justice of the United States, so it was way back.
Second Chief Justice of the United States.
This woman, she lived until my mother was 12 years old. She died when my mother was 12. She raised my mother. That's why my mother was so old-fashioned. She was raised by her grandmother. But grandmother Marshall was very well-educated and very, very knowledgeable and well-mannered and knew how to do everything. But she had married a man that appealed to her, and he wasn't good enough for her. But that was sad.
Well, this what would you call this? A spinning wheel?
Yes, it is a spinning wheel.
It's a spinning wheel.
But it is called a wool wheel because it was there's a smaller wheel that you sit and.
Yes, that you use with your feet.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with that.
Well, but this is for wool, and you would.
Now, would you say that this came from Kentucky? What part? Where was this built?
The man who was head of the museum at Berea, Kentucky, told me this was not made in Kentucky. It's too fine. There was nothing like this made in Kentucky in those days.
Wow.
It had to have been brought over from the coast, like some city in Virginia, probably.
Wow.
It comes apart. We brought it in the trunk of our car. You can take it all apart, and it all fits back together again.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
All right, you want to go back in there and check on Bill?
It goes.
Sounds like
This is backwards. It should be the other way's the front.
Well, do you want it turned? Do you want me to help you turn it or no?
No.
Why don't we let Barbara do that?
No. Anyway, it's you would walk. She also was called a walking wheel because you walk back and forth as you did. I don't know. Barbara took some lessons on it at one time. She took some lessons.
It's pretty beautiful. I mean, you can tell it's
Special. Yeah. Now you would have a narrow piece of leather on here. Right. This is just a cord, but there would be a piece of leather that would.
the leather is what kept it moving.
Yeah, but we don't have that.
That's all right. It's pretty beautiful.
It belongs in a museum. It should be in the museum. And I've told Barbara, I think it should be if we find a place where it should go. That's really what should happen, but it's to go to her. Now this reel is to go to Kevin. This belonged to my father's brother. Hey, look at this. This. See this thing here? Okay. You see? Now there's a turn.
Mm-hmm.
Turn it around. And as it turns, there's a mechanism here. I can't see it. But there's a little mechanism with a little brass.
Oh, I see it. Okay, there's like a
And
little knob there.
After this has turned so many times, like 25 times or something, it will go pop. It'll make a loud pop. And they call it a weasel.
I was just gonna say, pop goes the weasel.
That's right. It's called a weasel.
That
Now,
does this
thing-
tie?
Look, this is loose. This the screw mechanism in here was hand carved. It's not metal. It's carved out of hardwood. I don't know how they did it. Can you see him down in there? There's a see thing turn.
I see like a spindle.
Well, that's carved out of wood.
Wow. Oh yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. Well, anyway, what you would do is after you had spun your I don't know how this I can't get it back on. It goes some way. Just let it sit there. After you put your yarn on here somewhere. You fast and as you wind it up and you go around and around, and then after you get so many turns, that is what you would call a skein.
A what?
A skein.
A skein.
S-K-I-E-N. Skein. You ever hear of it? That's a measure of wool, yarn.
Okay.
In other words, to make a sweater might take 10 skeins.
Okay.
To make a little cover, it would take 50 skeins. I'm just picking.
Right. I get it.
Okay.
Huh.
So anyway, that's what that is. And this, somebody brought this to my dad when I was a little girl. They brought it to the house and they said, Dan, this was your mother's. And this was at the old house when they had a fire, but it was out in the barn. Been put out in the barn.
So this was Daniel Humfleet's mother's. This would be your grandmother.
Yeah, this would have been my grandmother on my father's side. That's my grandmother, great-grandmother on my mother's side.
So that spinning wheel, great grandmother on your mother's side, and this.
Right. This is my grandmother's on my father's side.
What was your grandmother's name on your father's side?
She was named Melvina Barker, middle name Barker. We don't know why. Big question mark. Last name, maiden name was Sprinkle. S-P-R-I-N-K-L-E.
Melvina Barker Sprinkle.
Humfleet.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's interesting.
But I know, see, I got to tell you this. When I was a little girl, the house was still there. And I remember driving up there and looking at it, and it was a big, tall, 2-story log house.
Now this is where, in Kentucky?
Yes, in Tuttle, Kentucky, where my father's ancestors' property was. The house was still there when I was little. It burned. But anyway, it was a huge house built out of logs. They knew how to do that. See, when they first went there was nothing there. They were pioneers.
Right.
There was no lumber. There was nothing to build a house out of. You had to just build. They knew how to build it out of logs. People helped them. And it was huge. Anyway, we went inside this house. And inside, there's this one great big room. And one end is a big fireplace. The other end is a loom. A loom. It takes up the
I know
whole
what a
end.
loom is, yes.
Okay, they've been there ever since his people were there.
Wow.
Nobody moved him.
Back then, you know Fran Santini, you know who that is, right?
Yeah.
I was talking to her, you know, about her house, and she said, well, she goes, yeah, my dad built this house, the house that she lived in on Primo. And she said, back then, when you built a house, your dad built it, and so did the postman and the neighbor and whoever you lived near. They built the house together. Everybody would come together and help build a house, you know, because there was no contractor or anything like that. You build a house, you'd go out and cut the logs down. And
now here's a funny thing that I learned later, that they built a little house across. There was a little lane, a street, later became a street lane. They were facing this lane. On the other side of this street, they built a small house that was called the weaning house. When daughter got married, they lived in the weaning house until Mama could supervise and make sure that she knew what she was doing.
Really?
And
That's interesting.
And if that son, I presume if son got married and brought his bride there, you'd have to bring her there so we could make sure she learned how to cook and make the fire and how to do the laundry, whatever.
Wow.
I don't know.
Now, would she have the baby with her, or this would be after? When you hear the word weaning, you're talking about weaning.
Not weaning, but not talking about feeding.
Babies.
Just weaning away from the mother. From the mother. She is learning how to be a wife out on her own, but she can't do it suddenly. Some of us
It was
tried.
almost like a training house.
Yes. Should have been called training, but it was called weaning.
A weaning house. I'll be darned.
Have you ever heard of that?
Never heard of that. First time.
Well,
Learn something new.
I didn't know about it either.
When I talk with you, I always learn new things.
Well, I don't know how much got lost over the years, but I have just found out that the Humfleets, of course, I knew they weren't always Humfleets. They were Umflets.
Right.
Okay. Then they were Umflets. Now, Umflets in England were part of the quote landed gentry. They had big manor houses. There's pictures of them. They sent me these pictures. They're still there. They look like small hotels. And these people were wealthy, landed people. They held important jobs in government and in the church.
Now, would this be in England?
Huh?
In England?
Yes, in England, yeah. In Worcestershire.
Worcestershire, okay.
Worcestershire, England. And these places are still known. They had coats of arms and stuff. They had, one of the houses is called Clint House. One's called Hadzor House. One's called Four Ashes Hall.
Four Ashes Hall.
Four Ashes Hall. They have names and carry those names. They're not owned by Umflets anymore, but they still carry those names.
Wow.
And there's a book written showing the pictures of the houses and talking about the Umflets that owns them.
It's fascinating to me that you've been able to trace your heritage this far back.
Well, I wouldn't have been able to do that, except that this Pam Simone's, she is the daughter of the man that was a minister over at that church where they're meeting, Colonial Dames.
Okay.
A meeting. And that's one reason they're meeting, is she started it. And she moved up to someplace up just near Cincinnati. But anyway, she is very advanced in professional genealogy. She had a certificate in teaching it. And she knew how. She belonged to some very exclusive clubs and companies.
So she's someone that you would pay maybe to do your genealogy?
Oh, yeah.
What's her name again?
Pam Simone's. But she's dropped it. She's not doing that now. She's supposed to be writing a book about her mother. Now, that's what she's doing.
Now, where does she live? Locally?
No, it says she's up near Cincinnati.
Oh, Cincinnati. Okay.
Yeah, I've got her address. But she has some kind of mental problem.
You want to go sit in the other room?
Yeah. Well, I just sit here. It's okay.